Hello viewer, thank you very much for clicking on this video and you're welcome to my YouTube channel. I am CrownDev. Please don't forget to subscribe and also click the notification bell. So at the end of today's tutorial, you'll be able to perform the Django CRUD operation using both traditional form, that's the manual way of creating forms, and also the Django model form, and that is the Django inbuilt forms. So at the end of this video, we're able to perform this CRUD operation. But before we go into the practical aspects, let's understand what the Django CRUD operation means. The Django CRUD operations refers to the fundamental operations that can be performed on data in a database using the Django. Now, CRUD stands for create, read, update, and delete. These operations are the building blocks of any application that interact with a database. Now, the Django CRUD operations allows us to be able to create data in our database, read data from our database, update data in our database, and also delete data in our database. So now I've already set up my the Django project already, and here I created a virtual environment called CRUD, and in it I created a project called CRUDs, and under that I created my app called Forms. I have set up my views. That is the first view I created, the home page views that returns us to home.html. That is our file located in our template, as you can see it here, home.html, which read server is running. Also, I've created my URL path that redirects to it. You can see an empty string that redirects to views.homepage name home. So I've already set up my Django project. It's just for us to just begin our CRUD operation. But if you don't know how to set up the Django project, check the comment section for the link to a video I made on that. So now to perform, let's start with the Django inbuilt forms. Now to be able to use the Django inbuilt forms, this forms here is an app that I created by saying py managers.py start app, and I created the app. So under these forms, we need a file called forms.py. File called forms.py. Now let me run my server again so that we can see it. Let me navigate to my project. So you can see it here, server is running, which is what is in our HTML here. Server is running. So now I want to be able to create data in our database from the front end. Like users should be able to input their data, for example, their first name, their last name, and age. And when they click a submit button, it stores in our database. That means we are creating data in our database. First, we want to do this using the Django inbuilt forms. So now let's go to our models and create our model class. Let's call this person. So we need a field for first name. Models dot char feed. That's to tell us that it's a text input. Master, let's say 500. We need another input for last name. Models dot char feed. Max length 500. So we need another feed for age. Models dot positive integer. Let's just say null should be equals to true. So now once users to be able to tell us their first name, their last name, and their age. So let me quickly set up my database. Now I have created a model in the Django. I need to make my migrations. Then after making my migration, migrate it so that I can be able to see those feed in the Django admin interface. That is the Django interface that is already built for admin. So py manage dot py make migrations. Next, py manage dot py migrate. So now I've make migration. Now let me quickly create a user, a super user. Py manage dot py create super user. So it's asking me for username. Let me just say CrownDev. So email address, I don't need an email address. So password, let me just set random password. It says the password is too short, the password is too common. So I can just bypass validation since we're just testing, just for a tutorial video. So now let me run my server again. So now let me navigate to the admin. Now I'm going to use those details I just registered there. CrownDev. And if you discover when we're inputting our password, we didn't see anything. That's how the terminal works for security reasons. But it's actually writing something when you are typing. So let me put my password. So now this is our interface, the Django inbuilt admin interface. So now we've created a model called person, but we're not seeing it in our interface here because we need to register this model in our admin. So we'll navigate to our admin under where we created the model. You can see it here. So we'll now say admin.site.register. Now the model we want to register, we need to import it. So from dot models means from this part, that is this dot, what this dot means, from dot model import person. So we'll say admin.site.register person. So let's see it now. So you can see it here, person. Let's click on it. From our database here, we can add person, but our goal is to be able to add person from our user using both manual forms and the Django input forms. And we are going with the Django input forms first. But first, let's add person here. Let's say crown, then dev, then age. Let's just put a random age, 56. Now you can see it here, same person object, but I want this to be displayed in form of a table format. So for this person, I can just create a class in my admin. I can give it any name I like, but for consistency and for easy recognition, I want to say person admin dot model admin dot model admin. Let me give space. I will be able to differentiate easily. So now we are going to say list display. Now we are going to list all the fields we want to be displayed in this model. That is first name, last name, and age. So in our admin, we are going to specify there first name, last name, and also age. So now when we say admin.site.register, we'll say register person using using person admin. So let's say it is now. You see it's displayed in a table format. So if we put another name, let's say mighty developer, let's just put the random age, let's say 98. Oh, it's too much, 43. can see it shows it in a table format. Now let's go back to our site. We want to create the Django forms that users can input their data from their end and it will save in the database. So let me open another tab for admin. So this tab will be for our admin page. Oh, sorry. So this tab will be for our users page and this tab will be the admin page. So now to be able to create the Django model forms, I've created a file called forms.py and this is where we're going to be working. Now I'm going to say from the Django import forms, from the Django.forms import model form. Now we want to create a model form for which model? For person model. So let's just, for consistency, you can give it any name, but I wish to give it class person form. Now it is a model form. So now we're going to define something called class meta. Now under here now we're going to have model should be equals to, now we need to import the model we want to use. So from dot, mean this part, dot models import what, we want to import person. So our model will be equals to person. Then we also will define our feeds should be equals to, so all the feed we need, now all the feed we need are the fields in this model. We want to create input form for first name, last name and age. So here we are going to have first name, last name and also age. So now we've successfully create a form, a model form for it. So now let's go to our views. In our views, where we want those forms to in our views, let us import the forms we just created. So from dot forms, that's meaning from this part, the part that is this part folder, from dot forms import person form. So now we need to create something like a dictionary. So let's say context should be equals to, so the essence of this dictionary is to be able to pass multiple data into our HTML. So now let's say multiple fields, models, whatsoever into our HTML. So now we are going to say person. Let's say we want to pass this person form so that we can be able to call it in our HTML. You remember, if you are used to JavaScript, you can say let a, let's say in JavaScript you can say var a should be equals to I am a boy. I am a boy. So directly you can just call, anytime you want to use a, you can just say console.log. You just say console.log a. So in the Django you can do something like this. So instead of saying console.log I'm a boy, you just pass it to a variable. So we are going to pass this person form, we are going to pass it to a variable. And to pass it to a variable, what variable are we defining? Let's say person form. Now I'm going to pass it to the variable. So we are going to pass it into this person form here. That's the form we have created in our forms.py. So it should be, we are passing it to person form. So this should be like this, not that type of bracket. It should be a curly bracket. So we'll be able to pass person form to this variable. So now we'll now pass our context to our HTML. So now in our HTML, let's go to our HTML. We can now access the properties of this person form. So now to access the property, all I just have to do is to create two curly brackets and say person dot. Now there are two ways how we can access this. We can say the variable, we call the variable person form, person form dot the field we want to call. Let's say dot first name. Now let's see. Okay, it says could not pass remainder. Person form dot first name. Let's see how we passed it. Okay, let's make it small letter and see person form. So now we see it has created it here already. Now you can see the form is displaying here. So now, or we can just call it, we can call everything as a person form dot as underscore p. The Django will automatically create everything for us with labels. When we refresh, you can see first name, last name, and age. But I don't want to do like this because I want to teach us something along the line. So let's go, let's call the field person dot first name. Let's give double break. Let's just copy this. Now we need person dot last name. Also we need person dot age. So you can see the three forms here. But as a user, how will the user be able to differentiate that this is the first name, this is the last name, and this is the age? So we need to, if it were been HTML, we'll have just said input and we'll have defined our placeholder and say first name. I'll be able to see it in the HTML. But now, how do we now define all these placeholder in our the Django inbuilt model form? So to be able to do that, as our forms, to be able to do that, we need to define something called widget under that model form we are defining. So widget should be equals to, now this widget allows us to be able to define attributes in the model form we are creating. So now we want to define an attribute for first name. Now we are going to say forms dot text input. Text input. Now after this, we're now going to say attribute should be equals to, now I'm going to use a curly bracket here. Now I want to define placeholder. Placeholder attribute. Placeholder. Now what should the placeholder be? First name. Now, so we defined a widget. Inside the widget we have first name, forms the text input, and we defined our attribute. Now let's go to our HTML. When we refresh, you see we already have a placeholder in the first name field. Now the same thing, we now have a comma and do the same thing for other fields that we want. So this is the reason why I did not use the dot as p for us directly. So now this will now be last name, and when we refresh it, oh, now you can see we are seeing last name here on the first name input. That's because they are defining for first name here, but let us define for last name. So you can see first name, we can see last name. Also we need for age. So we are defining for age here. So let's refresh so we can see it here, age. So now let's create a submit button. Submit. The type should be submit. So one that when a user inputs his or her data in this place and click submit. When we come to our database, it gets registered here. So we can delete this. Let's delete it. So now let's go to document now. So now to be able to do that, all these our feed, input feed are usually in forms. So we're going to create a form with a method of post. And in the Django, in every form, we use cross site request forgery underscore token. Now this is a security measures in the Django to prevent cross site request forgery attack. So this should be token. So now let's have our forms here. Yes. So now we're going to come to our views. Now we want to define that when users input their data here, it gets stored in our database. We can see our database is empty now. So first we have the forms here. So we're going to say if request dot method is equals to post. Now the best way I'll tell us to be able to do this is to be giving our button a name, so that in case you have multiple forms in one HTML page, you can just call them by their name. So let's call this submit one. So when we say if request.method is equals to post, instead of defining our view directly, we can now say if submit one, in request dot post. So now what should now happen here? Now we are going to say, let's create a variable. Let's say uh, past should be equals to, now the form that we imported, that is this person from the form we defined, person form, then request dot post. So now we'll now say if past dot is valid, if past dot is valid, then past dot save. So now let's go to our HTML page. Let's refresh it. This should not be there because I'm not defining anything. It should just be past should be equals to the form we created, then a bracket, then inside the bracket we have request.post. So that's why I said invalid syntax. So it's running now. Let's refresh it. So now yes, it should work now. Let's go back to our HTML page. Now you see our database is currently empty. So let's impute from the user end crown, say crown code. Now what age? Let's say age, let's just say 12, a random age. Now let's click submit. Now let's go to our database and refresh. We can see it here, crown code, then age is 12. So let's try another name. Let's say Bale Adiola, now age 45. Submit. And let's now refresh. Can see Bale Adiola 45. So this is how to create data from the user end using the Django model form in our database. So now to be able to use manual forms, let us comment this, then come and define our form. So when we are using manual form, we define our form with a method of post. Then also we are still going to have our cross-site request forgery token. Then we define our inputs. Let's say our first input. Okay, let me show you our web page where we are working on. Now let me refresh this. Now you see, so let's create our first input. input. So we give it a name of first name, first name, and a double break. So I'm going to need this for last name and also age. So this is last name and this age. Now let's have a submit button. A submit button with a type of submit. Then we have submit here. Now let's go to our database and delete all this. So we need to delete this also. So now we've created our forms with our input and we've given them name. Now let's check it in our we can see the input forms here but no placeholder. So let's give them placeholder first name. You can see there. Let's give also a placeholder of last name and this a placeholder of age. Now if the user clicks submit, let's comment this. Now let's give our button a name also of a submit one. So in our views we're going to have if request dot method is equals to post. No, the post is in uppercase. Now if submit one, that's the button we are checking for, submit one in request dot post, what should happen? Now we need to retrieve the inputs that are here. So now to retrieve that, we are going to say, let's say first name should be equals to request dot post dot get. Then I'm now going to call the name of the input field we want to get from. That is, what is the name? First name, all together in lowercase, first name. So last name should be equals to request dot post dot get. We are getting what? Last name. That is whatsoever name you give to the input. Also we need age. Age should be equals to request dot post dot get. And what's the name we gave to it? Age. So age. Now after getting this name, the next thing is to create the object. Person form dot object dot create. Now all this input that we retrieve here, we pass them to this variable first name. So this first name variable, we are going to pass it to the field name. That is the name we have in our models. So first name should be equals to first name, comma, last name should be equals to last name. No, should be equals to last name. Sorry, this is our this first variable here will be the variable will be our feed variable. So we have first name, the first feed variable. Also we have last name. Then we are passing them to this variable that is storing the data we retrieve from the input. So this will be last name, then age should be equals to age. So we're going to have a comma here also. Now we create this object in our database after retrieving it. So let's check it out. Now our database is empty. Let's say, no, let me use this thing now. Let's say Bala James, then age 45. So okay, person form as no attribute object. All right. So this is a very big error. Now we are trying to create this model called person, not our forms. So we're meant to say person, not person form. So it's meant to be person. That is the model that we are creating. I'm so sorry for that error. Now we import that model also from dot model import person. So please take note, we are going to create objects on the model we've imported, and that model we are going to create the feeds in that model. We'll first retrieve the inputs from user, then we'll now store those inputs in the models we are creating. So let's go back to our okay, let me refresh it. So let's have Bala, then James, then the age, let's say 34. Then let's click submit. Now let's go to our database and refresh it. We can see Bala James 34. Let's say Odun, okay, Oshun. Let's say my name is Oshun Paul, just a random name. Now the age, let's say 78. I'll click on submit. I'm going to see it now. See it here, Oshun Paul, age 78. So that is how to use manual forms to input from users. Now what of if there's an error in the manual form? We want to check error so that in case the user is inputting a wrong input, or we want to ensure that all fields are filled first before the submit action can take place. We can use JavaScript to do that, but in the client sides, a very smart developer can manipulate your JavaScript from the client side. So now let's check for errors. So we're going to say if not all. Now we're now going to call the field we want to check. This if not all means we want to check if all these field we defined here, if their data actually in the input, like if their data actually retrieved from the input. So we're going to call the first variable we define first name, then last name, then also the age. Then now if not all, that means if one of it is not filled with data, we want to use the Django error messages. So we're going to say messages dot error. Now we're not going to pass in a request. Then we're going to say we're going to pass in the error message we want to display. Please fill in all forms. So we also need to import our messages. So to import that, we're going to say from, you can see it's already giving us a flag that with this is missing, this module is missing. So I'm going to say from the Django dot contrib import messages. So now we said we checked if not all, that means if first name, last name, age, if one of it is not filled, return these error messages. So else else you should perform this operation by creating the user. Now if we are returning error messages, we need to check it in our HTML, and to check that, first of all, we'll use the Django if statement. If messages, we are checking if messages exist, then let's end our if statement, and if. Now if messages, we're now going to say loop through it by saying for let's say info. You can give it any name you wish. You can say for med, any name you so wish. So for info in messages, now we end our for. Then we'll now use any name you give, you call there. You're not going to use it to call the message info dot message. Now let's also give a break here. So in our views, we check if not all, first name, last name, age, return this error message. We pass in a request and pass in our message, else create the account. So now let's go to our, let's refresh it. Now let me just fill one of it and click submit. Okay, there's an error. So this our for if not all should have a square bracket. Everything should be enclosed in a square bracket. So it should be like this, everything enclosed in a square bracket. So now let's check it out. Let me just fill one of it and click submit. So you can see it says please fill in all forms. Now let's refresh it again and click submit. It says please fill in all forms. So we'll be able to and display error messages using the Django messages. So now let's test our, this is our database. Now we're able to let's just feed any manual name now. Let's just fill any manual name now and click submit. In our data, where we refresh, we are going to see it, and we used a traditional form, that is, we defined our inputs manually. So now let us go to reading of data from our database using the Django. So now to be able to read from our database, let's go back to our views. Don't forget, this was the model we created. We called it person. So we want to read the data that will be in this model called person. So we are going to go to our views. Now to be able to read, we want to read all the data. We need to say, now we are leaving the else statement. You see, when I pressed enter, it continued in the else statement, but I need to leave the else statement because I'm no longer defining operations in the else statement. Now I have to move directly to this indentation. So now to be able to call the data in that model, remember we've imported the models by saying from dot models import person. So let's create a variable and pass it into the all the data from that person model. So let's say data, let's say person data should be equals to, now the model we want to retrieve from is person. So we are going to call that model, or any model you want to retrieve from, person dot object dot all. Now let's pass it into a variable here so that we can call it in our HTML. Let's say data should be passed into person data. So there need to be a comma here. So now in our HTML, let's say we want to display it under these forms. Now we need to loop through all these data. So we are going to use the Django for loop. We are going to say we are going to end our for. Now after creating a for loop, you need to end your for. End for. We are going to say end for. Now we're not going to say for. So we can give it this for now. This variable I want to call, I can give it any variable I wish. Let's say I say for element in. Now for elements in where now in this in data. So data now is person data, and person data is equals to person.object.all. So we'll be able to pass it directly into this data, so we can call it in our HTML. So for element in data, now we're now going to display it by saying elements dot. Now we have in the model, what do we have? We have first name. So let's say element dot first name. So now let's go to our said for element in data, element dot first name. Sorry, there's no s in our element, or let's even add s. So you see that we can use any variable we wish to define here. So let's go back and refresh. See this typographical error. It should be elements. Yes, it should correspond to what we define here. Element. So let's check it out now. So we can see it now. What? Now let's display it in a list form. Let's say ul li. So we want it to be displayed here, element dot first name. Then we should also have element dot last name. That is the last name here. Also we want to have element dot age. Don't forget, you can give any variable here that will be able to use to call data in the model. So we can see what FGBJ6555. So let's delete this and create some readable name. So let's refresh. We see it as deleted. So I say CrownDev code. So I say 45. Okay, 44. Click some. We're going to see it here. It has created in our database. So now we're already reading from our database. Now we are reading all these value. So let me make this like this. So let me write another name. So okay, said please fill in the form. I've not filled in all form when I mistakenly press enter. So Matthew, let's say Matthew Esther, age, let's say 56, and we click enter. See Matthew Esther 56. So we're able to read from our database like this. Now the next thing is to be able to edit. Now let's say I make a mistake. Now I didn't want to write CrownDev, I wanted to write Crown Developer. So how are we going to be able to update this in our database from the user front end? So to be able to update data in our database, let's go back to our HTML code. So let's add an edit button here. Let's call it edit, or let's add a link also. Edit. Now when we refresh, we can see an edit button. Let's add another name, mighty developer. Mighty developer, let's say age 34 or 32. Now let's click submit. We can see it here, mighty developer age 32. So we can see this edit button, but this edit button is not doing anything yet. So let's go to our URL. Okay, let's go to our views first. Now let's create a view called edit, but before then, let's create an HTML page. Let's create an HTML page called edit.html. Edit.html. Yes. So now in our views, let's create an edit view. Let's pass in our request. Now return render. So request base slash edit.html. That's this base here. So now to define our URL, now we need to understand that we need to make let me put this here in an order we use them. So now we need to understand that we need to make the Django know the particular, you see, we just said we loop through all the elements, we loop through all the data in our model and display them in li each. So we need to let the Django know the particular element or particular data we want to edit. So now when we are defining our URL, now when we are defining our URL called path, now one thing we need to understand also is that each of these name that we are creating, they have a unique ID in the database. Like they have a unique ID in the database. Now let me clean this so that we'll not have any error, and let me show us something. Now in the database, when I click on mighty, you can see 12 here. This is the unique ID of this particular element. Now let me click Matthew. You can see this is the unique ID called 11. Now from here, let me just create another now you discover that if I delete, let's check, we have 12, we have 11, and we also have 10. Now let me delete this name and add it again, and let's see the ID it will give us. Mighty developer 82. Now let's click on it and see the ID. You see 13. That means each element in our database, either we've deleted them or not, they have a unique ID. A unique ID. So even though you delete it, you are deleting it with that unique ID. You are deleting it away. So no data in our database can have the same ID. So now when we are clicking edit, we need to tell the Django that we need to let the Django know the particular ID. So is that particular ID the Django will use to know the particular data we want to edit. So now we are going to be using the Django models form, and we're going to use manual forms in editing also. So now when we are now creating our URL, we need to create a space for this ID. So let's create our URL. When you go to edit, it takes us to views dot edit. Let's give it a name called edit. This name allows us to be able to call our URL anywhere within our project. So now to be able to let the Django. You see, when we click on mighty, it take us to 13 now, but we want either when we click on edit, it's going to tell us that particular ID. Now we need to create a space for that so that the Django can know, okay, this is the particular thing we want to edit. So you can use this knowledge or approach in any other thing you are doing also in the Django that requires ID. Maybe you want to retrieve a particular ID, you want to edit a particular user ID, so on and so forth. So we're going to say string, a string we are passing pk. Now in our views, we're not going to pass in the pk here. Now in our, we want that when the user click on edit, it takes us to edit page. Now first of all, let me first clean this so we can see that it's going to the edit page. We are going to come back and write that, or let me just cut it away so it will be easy to paste back. Now in our home.html, we can call the URL we want here in the Django form by saying URL. We want to go to, by saying URL. Let me reduce all these lines so that you can be seeing what I'm doing. I don't have to. So URL. Now this URL is taking us to the name we called, that is edit. Then it's taking us to edit. Okay, this should be in a quotation. And also let's check our views. We need to remove this pk since we are not using it yet. Yes, so let's go to edit. Now it takes us to the edit page. For you to be sure that it's the edit page, let me just put some random text. But this is not where we want to go to. We want to go to that particular data so that we can edit it. Now that is why we now passed this string pk. Then we now pass that pk here. That particular place where we wrote string pk, that is where the ID is going to be. So pk. Now let's refresh it. So page not found. Now let's click on edit. So now in our home.html, now we need to pass in the ID. So now we gave this element, we said we can put any variable here. So you are going to call the variable elements.id. So is that ID that the Django will now pass into this pk and will now call it here. So now let's refresh and click on ID. See, it said edit then 10. You can see we said we define our URL as edit slash string pk. So you can see it here, edit 10. Now let's click on mighty developer. You can see edit 13. So we can remove this now. We don't need it. So now we're able to, the Django now knows the particular data we are clicking on by this particular ID. So now we can now edit this particular data. Now how do we edit this particular data? Remember, we want to use the Django form first before using the manual form. So now home.html, don't forget we once defined this form here that we've created before in our forms.py. So now we will need it again. Let's just copy it and go to our edit.html. So when we go to our edit.html, we want it to display this model form that we've called before in our edit.html. So now, so you discover that the forms are not showing. That is because in our views.py, we need to create a dictionary. Let's call it context. Should be equals to. So this dictionary, we need to pass the form into it, and we've done that here. So we can just call it again. Remember, we said this name here that's in quotation, you can give it any name you wish. So let me copy it. So we have person form. Now we've passed it into it. Now let's refresh. Let's go back to our edit.html. So person form dot first name. Now we need to pass it to our edit so our edit can read the dictionary context. So now let's refresh. So now we can now see all these forms here, but now we want it in such a way that when we click on this any of the data, it takes us to that particular data, and the data that will be in this form will be all this data here. For example, as we click on CrownDev code 44, in the first feed we are going to see CrownDev, in the second feed we are going to see code, and in the third feed we are going to see 44. So now to be able to do that, now remember the Django now knows the particular ID that we are clicking on. It passes it to this URL here by saying edit. That's why you can see edit/10. Now in our views, now we now passed it here now. So now we want to retrieve. Now you remember using this person data, now we are retrieving all the old data in the person feed, that is in the person model, that is this model we imported. Now we only want to retrieve a particular data. So let's say we say person data should be equals to person the model dot object. This time around we're not going to be saying all, we're not retrieving everything, we just want to get a particular one. Get. Now we'll now say id should be equals to pk. So now it's going to go to the database. Now the Django now is going to pass this 10. When we click on it, it's going to pass it to this pk, and it's going to pass that 10 to this id. So the Django is going to, this person data will be equals to the data with the id of 10. Now we now want to, now when we now click on it, now we want all this feed here to contain that particular data that we retrieve. So now person form now would not just be equals to this person form here. Now this person form now is an empty model form that we defined in our forms.py, but this time around now we want it to be equals to the data we are retrieving from this person data. So we are going to say person form should be equals to person data. Now person data is equals to the data it's retrieved, the particular data I retrieve using this id. Now so let's say it retrieve data 10 now. Now let's say it retrieve data 10 now. In our edit.html now is going to be saying data 10 dot first name. It's going to display that particular name. So now let's refresh it now. Let's go back to our views. So we said person data should be equals to person dot object dot get. So we get it with the require id. So now we are making a mistake here. Now this person data, now we're supposed to call this form. See the way it's displaying now, we cannot edit it or do anything to it. We want it to be in a form that we can edit. So we are going to say person data should be equals to our model form, that is person form, and the instance should be equals to. So now, or let's continue like this by saying person data is equals to this. Now let's define another thing. I'll say person instance should be equals to person dot object person form. Now to be equals to our the model form that we've defined, person. So person form, I will say instance should be equals to person data. So now the instance is equals to person data, which is equals to the required id, to the particular data id. So now in our person form, now we'll now be saying person form should be equals to person instance, so it can be able to display it in a form format. So we can see it as displayed in a form format that is editable. Let's check something now. So we need to say, if I click on submit, nothing is actually going to happen. Okay, let's check it. Let me say 3, 4, 5, 6. Submit. Let me check here. See, nothing is changing. So now, if request dot method is equals to post, if submit one in request dot post, if person instance dot is valid, person instance dot save, then return redirect home. Now from here we could display the data to the user in a form. Now we now said if request dot method is equals to post, we need to make a post request to our back end or to our database using this person data is equals to person form. But this time around we are going to have request dot post. Now what is it posting? Is posting this instance back to the database. Now we can check it. Let us refresh it. Let's say this is 100. So you see it has changed to 100. So let me go to this Matthew-Western, change to Matthew-Western name, change the age to 50. Let's change this to Matt and let's click on submit. You see it has changed Matt Esther name, then age 50. This is how to update data in our database using the model form. So now what if we want to define the form ourselves? Now to do that, in our own .html we've already defined this form, so let's just copy it, then go back to our edit.html. Don't need this. Now let's silence this. Now in our database, if we check, all the changes we make will be made also. So now let's refresh. This is our, okay, let's go to the edit. I'm not seeing anything, so let's put these forms there. So now I can see the forms. Now what we are going to do now for this, let's go to our views. Let's copy this, and now I want to use manual method. So now we said person data should equals to person dot object dot get id equals to pk. Now we now said person instance should be equals to person form, but the instance now should be equals to person data. So now we now pass this instance person instance to this form. So now how are we going to show it now in this manual form that we have here? Notice a manual form, not a Django model. How are we going to show it here? So all we just have to do is to create something called value. Now in this value, we're not going to say, we're going to call the variable we passed it into this person instance by saying person form. So we want person form dot first name as the value. So we're going to say person form dot first name. So now let's refresh it. So now the other we have here, the reason why it's showing this is trying to show another form inside this input. Now the reason why is because we are passing person form into person instance, and person instance is equals to person form, but this time around we don't need the form. So let's pass it into person data, and let's see. So we can see it has shown CrownDev. So we'll go back to our edit.html. We go to value. We need it for we need the value for last name also. last name, and we also need it for age. So now we have a value should be equals to person from the last name, value should equals to person from dot age. So we can see it here. So when the user clicks submit, we want it to save in our database. So in our view.py, we'll need this, or let's just define it ourselves. If request dot method is equals to posts. Now if submit one in request dot post, we need to retrieve the data here: first name, last name, and age. So we are going to need this. Let's just get this. So we want to retrieve it. So if request the method is equals to post, yes, so first name should be equals to this. So we'll now say person data dot first name, that is the name in this our model. So person data dot first name should be equals to first name. So person data dot last name should be equals to last name, that is this element that is retrieving the text in the input. So person data dot age should be equals to age. They will now say person data dot save. So let's check it out. Now let's change this to, so after saving, let's return redirect to home page. Return redirect to home That's the name we gave it now, urls. So on refreshing this, let's change this to 500 and click submit. So it turns out you can see CrownDev code 500. This material star, let's change it to 2000. You can see it changes. So this is how to use the manual method to edit, to update data in our database. To be able to allow users to delete data in our database, or data related to them in our database. So first, let's go to our home.html, and let us add another button called delete. Now in our views, let's for our delete in our urls, we will need in our urls we just need something like this also, so that the Django can know the particular data we want to delete. Then this one will be delete. Then it's going to be taking us to views.delete, which we are going to create very soon. Views.delete, and the name will be equal to delete. So in our views, let's create a views called delete. So passing our request. So now we passing our pk. So now person data, you can give it any name you so wish. should be equals to person dot object dot get, and the id should be equals to pk. And when we get it using the id, the Django provides an inbuilt function to automatically delete. So we can just say person data dot delete, then we return redirect the user, return redirect back to the home page. So in our home.html, let's pass in our URL for the delete as URL delete, then elements dot id. So now let's refresh it. Now you can see delete. Now let's click delete. You can see it's deleted. It's deleted. I want to get to our database. Let's refresh it. You can see everything is gone. So this is how to use the CRUD operation in the Django. First, we can create like this CrownDev crown from the user side, age 53. Then we submit it, create it. Also in our database we can see it. Also we can edit it. We can edit it. Let's say we want to change it to CrownDev, crown developer. Want to change to crown developer now, and we click on submit. It edits it, and also we can delete it. I know you've gained something on my YouTube channel. Please don't forget to subscribe and also click the notification bell.